This looks like everybody's here. All right, so welcome attendees. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Leanne McKeown. I'm the Director of Corporate Outreach and Career Development for Touro University's Graduate School of Technology. We're thrilled to have you all here today for our very special panel entitled Cyber Risk Decisions, How Leaders Prioritize and Respond. I'd like to now introduce one of our very impressive professors. It's always such a pleasure to collaborate with Sach Hegde. So Sach, feel free to take it away and let everybody know what's in store for them this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'd like to thank the panelists, Robert, Ben, and Begum as well for hosting this today. I've been looking forward to this for the best part of this month, mostly because governance has had so many evolutions happening at the same time with AI, as well as with a lot happening in the public sector as well with the government. So I'm really looking forward to this. And just before I give it over to Begum, I'd like to introduce one of our students who is about to graduate from the Technology Leadership Program. Begum Erdem is a cybersecurity professional with over 10 years of experience. Begum supported banking and financial services clients for a very long time across a broad range of industries, including retail, technology, and telecommunications. She has previously served as a senior manager at Ernst& Young, where she led cyber risk, third-party risk, and governance initiatives for large regulated organizations. So, Begum, I'd like you to take it over and
Mhm.
thank you for doing this.
Thank you for the introduction, Sach. It's great to be here. I would also like to thank Touro University for supporting this initiative. And also a special thank you to Leanne and Sach for encouraging this idea and for all their support throughout the process. And I also want to take a moment to say that is, if you have ideas like finding an internship or organizing a panel like this, I would really encourage you to share them with the university. Touro is open the student-driven ideas, and they're supportive to when you take these kind of initiatives. Before we begin, I'd like to mention about that one of our panelists, is, like you mentioned, Harris Schwartz, was unfortunately unable to join us today. Let me briefly share how we'll structure the session. It will start with a few questions to guide the discussion, and then we'll open it up for the questions from students. With that, I'd like to turn to our panelists. I will ask each of you to briefly introduce yourself, your role, and what is your focus in your work. Ben, could you please briefly introduce yourself, and then we can go on through.
Start in alphabetical order. Can't go wrong that way. Yeah, Ben Rothke. I'm based in New York City, work in information security, deal with a lot of risk, compliance, cloud security. I've been in the industry, 25 years or so. About half of that has spent in an internal corporate role where I am now. And the other half in working for professional services and working for consulting firms. And just to reiterate, any comments I make today are exclusively mine and not that of my employer. So glad to be here, and always love talking about risk.
Hey, I'm Rob Schmal. I work at Intuit, the company that brings you TurboTax, QuickBooks, MailChimp, Credit Karma. I've been at the company a little over 10 years, and for the last 4 years, I've been a member of Intuit's privacy team, and right now I'm leading the enterprise privacy organization, which in relevant part to today's conversation includes a group of lawyers that partner very closely with our Chief Information Security Officer, our Chief Information Officer, and the entire security and anti-fraud organization at the company. Prior to that at Intuit, I worked on the team that manages all litigation, disputes, and investigations for all products and services worldwide. And then prior to that, for about 13 years, I was a lawyer at a large international law firm. So really excited to be here and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Let's start with our first question then. When people say cyber risk, what does that mean in your world?
Yeah, I'll take that. If you remember the movie The Sixth Sense. So Cole says, he sees dead people. Everywhere he looked, he saw dead people. So when you're in information security, you see risk everywhere. The simple definition of risk is the possibility of loss. You use a car. Your car could be stolen. Your car could get in an accident. There's loss in everything. And when we move to information technology in the digital world, that those risks exist with those elements. At its core, cyber risk is the chance that something in your technology environment could cause harm. A lot of different areas that could happen: financial, operational, legal, reputational. There's everywhere. There's security threats. There's ransomware, data breaches. Then that's at the data layer. There's operational risks. Systems could go down. Data centers can lose power. They could. There's hurricanes. Cloud service provider could have outages. There's software. There's software bugs. Third-party risks. A man is not an island, so a organization is not an island too. So there's companies will have scores, hundreds, and thousands of third-party providers, and all of those present potential, cyber risk to an organization. You could have payment providers adding risk, supply chain partners, SaaS, anything in the cloud. The risks, extend there. Then we get into data risk. Data being corrupted, data being stolen. There's human risks. We can't live without people in the organization, but they introduce risks also. They could make accidental mistakes. IT systems are quite complex, and there's misconfigurations. I'm now connecting to the Zoom session via a browser, and there's about 1 trillion different ways this browser could be configured if you go into all the various combinations with various settings. So when you get into other cloud systems, there's risk there. There's malicious links, and then we could go on and on and on. But that's what cyber risk is. I mean, there's conferences that spend days on those topics alone. But really, every element in that IT life cycle brings its own risks, also brings its own opportunities. But for each opportunity, there's a risk there, and that's what we as technology professionals have to deal with.
Thank you.
So I love Ben's answer to this, and the way I would sum it up is what doesn't it include, right? It is an incredible family of risks that really is only multiplying with the technology. When I saw we talked about these questions a little bit in advance, and my mind immediately went to like how to start, how to get your arms around what this risk could potentially entail. And so for me, working at a company that makes products for consumers and small businesses, right? I think first about like risk to whom, right? Risk of what and risk to whom. And I think Ben really covered the of what. And so my mind goes to whom, right? Our customers, our workers, our shareholders, people who would be impacted by any one of those things going wrong. are what I kind of immediately think of and try to organize my thoughts that way. And then the other way I thought to think about it was people, process, and technology, right? Um, Along all three of those dimensions, there are real categories of cyber risk that are sort of ever present and in front of mind every day. With people, people are our strongest and our weakest link, right? We're no better than the people who are working for us and with us. And so we think about social engineering and insider risk and the capabilities that our teams have to deploy, great code that's free of defects. Processes, we think about the way people do their jobs, right? We think about whether they're trained related to security and how they think about protecting the enterprise, whether you have a see something, say something culture, right? All things that I think can be addressed with processes. And then technology is like everything in your infrastructure, and Ben's going to be much more qualified to speak to most of those things than I am as a lawyer. But everything in your infrastructure, particularly those parts of it that are aimed at preventing these kinds of threats. But honestly, I think it goes well beyond that. And of course, the technology extends to what technology is being pointed right back at you, right? What impact does the rise of agentic and other AI, other LLMs, what impact does that have on the threats that you're going to face as a person who's charged with defending an enterprise or an organization from cyber threats? So like it really, it's a lot, I guess, is my very short answer.
It's a helpful perspective. Thank you. From that point, how does the governance and risk compare and contrast between a product company and a service company? How are the internal processes similar or different?
I mean, at its core, I think information security is the same. For any organization, you've got the basic controls, and whether, let's just say Johnson and Johnson, they make all these consumer goods, and so they're going to use firewalls, they're going to use encryption, antivirus, hardened servers, and they're using Amazon. Amazon has their data center, and they're doing those things also. They've got users, they've got identity management program, authorization, two-factor, multi-factor authentication. So overall, there's not huge differences. And each one has its own set of, unique risks. Johnson and Johnson has to worry about a lot of intellectual property. On the other side, Amazon has to worry about, their IP. But, at its core, there is in security called the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But, everyone's, we're all in the same boat trying to, secure that data, keep those systems from harm. So I don't see, huge difference at the macro level between a product and a services company. Sort of at the nuance level, they are going to have differences, but they're facing different risks. But it's not like even it's a car. In the U.S., the driver's on the left side. If you go to the UK, the driver's on the right side. But fundamentally, you're going from point A to point B. Just doing it a little differently.
Yeah, I think where my mind goes for that question is the point you made. I think just kind of comparing like a Johnson and Johnson, right? It makes consumer products. They're going to have certain types of data that will make them an attractive target for certain types of operatives, right? Who have certain ambitions. Whereas a services company, where we have, like Intuit, where we have sort of a very moment-to-moment relationship with customers, and we are, for example, moving money in real time and those sorts of things, I think presents a different profile, different set of potential targets, or maybe looks different as a target to different threat actors, and it really depends on the goal, right? Obviously, the goal ordinarily is monetization, one way or another, but there are different schemes, I think, that go into, a services company that moves money may be targeted because that that service itself can be monetized, right? As opposed to a company that has more in the way of, as you said, Ben, intellectual property laying around where that's monetized potentially by a sort of more of a ransom threat, right? And so but I completely agree. The defenses are the same, right? The technology that needs to be deployed, the rigor, the approach to building a solid security posture is the same. I just think you may find yourself at the sort of the tip of the spear of a different set of threat actors, potentially with different methods and techniques.
Those were the good points. Do you explain cyber risk to non-technical leaders in a way that leads to action?
Ben, do you want me to start this one?
Sure.
You've taken the laboring oar on the first couple. Let me jump in first. The way I think about this is I need to put it in terms that that they understand. And right, so I think about this as how it affects our customers. I sort of alluded to this in one of my other answers, but like this matters because it affects our customers. This matters because it affects the trust that we're trying to build with a variety of stakeholders, including and especially our stakeholders. And so the way we try to frame this internally is that security is job one. It's literally a P0. Because if we don't get that right and we undermine the trust and faith that our customers have in us, and then sort of slightly secondarily, our workers, our shareholders, regulators, our partners, right, important partners that provide elements of our technology, then we won't go anywhere as a company. And so we've been very successful making the case within our company that security is job one. It always needs to be a P0, and it's there because it's fundamental to our reputation with our key stakeholders.
Yeah, thanks. Robert's the attorney, so to his point, I'll say no objections. I concur. I think, with communication, the key is, first off, you want to avoid, using technical jargon. There's, the IT acronym dictionary has thousands of entries. And there's nothing wrong that they're not technical people. And when you get a prescription medicine, often it comes with that very detailed information sheet made for physicians. And then there's another one for the non-healthcare professional. There's nothing wrong. I look at these and you can see, the chemical makeup of what the drug does. I don't understand it, but I don't need to. But the other consumer information, gives me that information that I can understand. So the main thing is, avoid jargon. You need to let them know, just as adverse events could occur in the physical world, so too similar adverse events could exist in the digital world. You don't want to use terms that risks cybersecurity pros use on an hourly basis. They may not know. What's a 0-day attack? What is ransomware? You don't want to sort of have, when you use these and they don't understand, then you have to stop and define it, and that can derail things. So you say something to the effect like, email is a very powerful tool, but occasionally, if you click the wrong link, it could affect the networks. It could potentially take it out of service for days, and that could affect the organization. That works when speaking to end users. When someone in information security is speaking to executives and the board, they also don't want to feel stupid. Don't use terms. And there's a very powerful tool called FAIR. It's called Factor Analysis of Information Risk, and it's a taxonomy that deals with the factors. That's the F that contribute to risk and loss. And it deals a lot with probabilities around the frequency and magnitude of data loss events. So FAIR gives you a language where a risk professional could speak to the board in the language they understand, and in the language of risk, in the language of business. and it makes them understand what it is, and enables the board to be involved in making those quantitative risk decisions. So you could Google FAIR. There's the FAIR Institute, which has a lot of information. There's a great book out there by Jack Jones and Jack Freund on FAIR. Once again, a very extremely powerful tool that could give the risk professional the ability to speak in a language where not only will the board understand them, they'll appreciate them and want to bring them back. You know, when you start talking about crypto and key links and algorithms, you know, they'll thank you for your time and, you know, slam the door behind you. So, you know, that's an effective way to do things.
I'll
Really
also
insightful.
just to add to
Yeah.
that, I think another thing you can do is talk to them about these issues when it's not an emergency, right? Talk to your leaders about cybersecurity when everything's going pretty well. Number one, your board needs to know how things are going in order to acquit its responsibilities to be, you know, assisting with the governance of the company. But more to the point, they can also help you with resources, right? But if you've explained these topics to them in advance, they won't be hearing some of these terms for the first time in a firefight, and I think that can be really helpful to bring them along.
I mean, that's, you know, he's in, you know, you want like preventative medicine rather than, you know, having to show up to the emergency room all the time.
Yeah.
Ben, it's interesting actually that you bring up FAIR because you know, we actually looked at how you know, Netflix uses FAIR to drive a lot of their business decisions, and you know, one of the intelligent aspects of FAIR is that you can apply it in such a way where you can make business decisions that look at it from a cost first perspective, right? Which is that what is the cost of implementing security versus what is the cost of going after new business versus making this investment in security. So, you know, giving students that perspective of, you know, security is a feature oftentimes, and also the more that you're as a security professional able to speak to business needs, the better you're going to be able to come across to leadership and the C-suite. So really interesting that you brought that up. I actually had a question about something that I came across very recently. Now it is a technical vulnerability, but I wanted kind of like a governance viewpoint from you both, Rob and Ben. I don't know if you've come across this, but Apple Pay has this vulnerability. It's been, you know, discovered like years ago. I believe it's been about 5 years. It was discovered in 2021. And this vulnerability works in a very specific situation where you have an iPhone with express transit mode enabled, where you can tap to pay, and it detects that the scanner is a transit scanner and essentially bypasses Face ID. And they found that when this express transit mode is enabled and it's used along with a Visa card, it can lead to no-click charges of up to $10,000 and even beyond. I think I saw MKBHD, the popular tech creator, work with another creator, and they showed that this vulnerability actually leads to losses of like over, like, you know, limitless, could be tens of thousands of dollars. And the vulnerability itself is interesting to me, but also the fallout of that is that I think on Apple's side as well as on Visa's side, neither of them kind of take ownership of kind of that vulnerability. Both kind of you know, play the blame game with each other and claim that the responsibility lies on the other entity as far as taking ownership of this risk is concerned. So I just kind of wanted both of your opinions on that, which is like, you know, I'm sure this isn't an isolated case. This is just a very well-known and popular case where this has happened. But Have either of you ever come across a situation where it's very difficult to kind of establish ownership of risk, and if there's no accountability, obviously it's very difficult to kind of manage that risk.
So I think the payment space is particularly ripe for issues like this because there are so many institutions involved in the movement of transaction, right? There are many banks, card issuer, there are lots of hands through which these transactions flow, and I think it's a perfect context for something like this to occur. So my understanding of this one is that both parties have looked at it and decided that it's either somebody else's responsibility or would be so difficult to patch or would cause, other unintended consequences that they've left it alone. I think it's a risk-based calculation, and a lot of this work I think is risk-based in nature, right? You have to make decisions about where you're going to put your points because you cannot put them everywhere, right? If you're doing a good job of assessing what your inherent risks are in an organization, especially one as large as Visa, that is so integral to the payment systems of many countries, and is so large, you have your inherent risk list will be very, very large, and you hope to get to as many of those inherent risks and reduce the remaining risk, right? The residual risk as much as you can, and to do it in the places where you're getting the most bang for your buck. My sense is that this is the decision to not address this is really because it's low enough down on the priority list that it has not been deemed enough of a risk reduction that it justifies the work. But there is real risk there, both to individual customers, right? Potentially who find themselves in this like perfect storm situation of having this thing enabled and finding themselves connected to somebody who's running this man in the middle scheme. Um, and there is risk to the company reputationally from that as well. But again, I think you have to put your points someplace, and the people who manage these risks for Visa and I guess for Apple have made a decision that this is a below the line for now.
Mhm.
I mean, I think adding to that, there's when you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, it's there's always going to be finger pointing, and it's not. It sometimes can be a challenge to say who is responsible, who's the responsible party, and what is the risk, and ultimately risk is a trade-off. You have to find that point in the sand, and there's certain when someone the default when going into a lot of subway trains or transit systems where the fare might be $2, $3, $4, $5. If there's a delay or an error, it will default to accepted because the risk there is minimal. When someone goes into the Rolex store and they're buying a $4,000, $30,000 watch, they are not, they're dealing with a different a different set of risks there. And there's, it's like being in that emergency room, you're triaging things, and it, with that, I'm not familiar with that specific payment issue, but there is compensating controls they could put in place. They could deem the risk minimal. Sometimes things are rather sophisticated, and so as with fare, you take all that into play. You think of what are the quantitative issues, what are the probabilities of it happen, and then you make the decision. And many times you make the right decision. Occasionally you make the wrong decision, and then you have to suffer the consequences. But that's sort of a day in the life of a cyber risk professional, is dealing with events like that.
But at least I think if you have a rigorous approach to how you assess risk, you have a defensible reason for having chosen one over the other, right? At the end of the day, this might turn into a problem, right? We could see a big hit on this, and Visa might end up in the papers, and people will come and ask questions. Maybe a regulator comes and asks questions, but Visa will say, "Look, we have a risk register. We go after the ones that we deem the largest. We have a very sophisticated process for assessing inherent residual risk, and we made our decisions. And that's going to be more defensible than we just didn't get around to it, right? And so I think those kinds of processes are really important in a domain like this, where you have to be very risk focused.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, especially from a legal perspective, is that nothing is 100%. But the point being is, if you have to go if in front of a jury, the chief risk officer, chief security officer, whatever, if they could defend their position, we took this approach based on this information, based on this formal process we have, based on consultation, etc. That is about, once again, that's all anyone could do. We're not expected to be superhuman. So if it is and stuff will happen. There's unknowns. There's things, unknown risks. A lot of these are very very complex, dynamic environment. But the key point is to have that formal process in place. And if you could defend it in front of a jury, in front of the board, that's that even if an adverse event happened in the end, that is fine, because that is life, and that's all you could do.
Really helpful insights. Going to the next question, at what point does a cyber issue stop being just a technical issue and become a leadership issue?
I think often it's a lot earlier than organizations think. I think the main thing is, you have this, when does a mountain, become a hill, and when does a building become a skyscraper? So, all these, some of these are philosophical issues, but from a risk perspective, a cyber issue becomes a leadership issue when it could, materially, affect the business, not just IT. So anything that could, bring systems down, stop payment systems, regulatory issues, if those are serious risks, and that's a leadership. Things like data breaches. There's a well-known journalist, one of the most respected in the industry, Brian Krebs. Brian Krebs writes an article about you. That's a serious leadership issue. I started at the beginning. I said, it occurs a lot earlier than most think. The corollary to that is that organizations often wait too long to deal with them, and as Rod was saying earlier, start thinking about these things when the waters are very calm. But because if it gets to the point that leadership is reacting, then they're going to have to do that under pressure, and they won't be able to make good, controlled, pragmatic decisions. So I said, the earlier entities start dealing with it, the much better it is overall.
So looking at this question on paper, I think I took a little bit different approach to it, and I thought about it in terms of like when does a cyber issue or a cyber threat become something that you need to address with leadership? Like not tell leadership, but where you need leadership in order to combat it, right? You need the force of leadership, and the way I thought about it is when the solution isn't technology, right? The solution is culture. The solution is what your people do in their everyday work, right? Do they write good code that is free of defects? Do they participate in your secure software development lifecycle? Are they running on paved paths instead of building things that are not common across your infrastructure? I think of an issue like social engineering, right? Phishing. Your workers, the members of your institution, their response to those sorts of threats, I think of as a leadership issue, right? To train people and have a cadence of instruction and a culture of calling things out, right? It's not enough just to not click on the phishing email. I want you to report it, right? Because if you report it to me and it only went to you, or maybe it only went to you and 25 other people, you reported it to me and now I can go find it and pull out of the inboxes of all those other people. That's a cultural issue, and that's driven by leadership, by leaders who take this stuff seriously, and recognize that there's real risk to the company that can be combated, of course, with some technology, right? There are good products out there that'll help you find phishing emails when they come in, but stuff gets through, right? And so what I thought about this in terms of where can you make an impact as a leader, and not by going out and necessarily going out and buying new technology, but rather, like building a culture that's aware of these issues and takes them seriously. The other thing I think is overall, one thing that really aids in the technology that you can employ is having the resources to do it, right? So having the leadership to go in front of your senior leaders in the company or your board of directors and say, this is really important. We need to fund this. We need to make time and space for getting this stuff right. And that's a leadership issue. That's a management issue before it's a technology issue, right? We need the resources, we need the space. We need you to make time for this on the calendar of when you're engaging with the people who do the work, to make sure that they understand this is really important. We need the tone from the top, right? And so that's the direction I took this question. Not sure which one was intended, but hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, it was important point there. Looking at this, this from the different angle, what part of cyber risk do organizations still underestimate today?
Counselor?
So my vote on this is insider risk. You have, like, you could pick many things here. My experience in talking to colleagues at other companies and reading what's out there. Sorry, we're gonna have dogs barking here for 1 second. In reading some of the reporting we're seeing related to some pretty significant incidents, is that I think companies still underestimate the potential for insider risk in their company, in the institution, organization. It is very hard, I think, to have a mindset of there being people among you that you hired and you rely on, and you think very highly of, that some of them may intend to do you harm, or may be indifferent to harm being done to you. And I think it is, unfortunately, we have to have a more skeptical lens. At least we need to employ some folks within the company who take a more skeptical lens to insider activity, and who are using the tools and technology available to identify insider risk as early as possible. It's coming at us lots of different ways right now. We have people pretending to be people that they are not. We have people being paid by external threat actors to hand over information. We have people who are being blackmailed, right? Or otherwise coerced into giving away company information, customer data, access to systems, and those threats are very real. They are in some ways easier to effectuate those types of frauds and infiltrations than technical ones, right? We've gotten pretty good at defending our enterprises through our tech stack. We still have people, and those people are susceptible. And so I think insider risk is something that we probably aren't, as a set of companies, as an economy, right? I think we are probably not as focused on and as well armed against as we probably ought to be.
Yeah, to that point, I think a lot of management doesn't always understand how cyber risk plays out in their business. They think it's about switches, routers, firewalls. Companies like Check Point have done a really good job of ensuring firewalls are quite resilient, and they're on every corporate network. So when someone wants to attack a network, often they won't go necessarily to the firewall, they're going to go to the next step, attack the humans. And that's why getting credential attacks, access to email, and the like. The identity is now really the Fort Knox of things, and it's quite easy to impersonate now. There was an issue, I think it was with MGM last year. They impersonated someone, and they got administrative credentials. Another area I think is that the supply chain, third parties, large, within the Fortune 500, they're dealing with thousands of different vendors. And one of the earliest mega hacks was when Target was breached about 15 years ago. Sort of like with a company name like Target, they're almost begging to be attacked. But that was I think it was their HVAC vendor who put them at risk. And companies need formal third-party risk management programs. They have to. Many of these vendors, they'll give them access to networks, to data, and they haven't properly vetted them. I think that's one issue. In the standard financial disclaimer is past results aren't indicative of future performance. So a lot of companies haven't been attacked. They think just because they've never had a breach, they think they're okay, and they've got this bulletproof vest. They think their information security program is fine. That's not a good thing. Many firms think just because they've never been breached, that's fine. It's not that they haven't been breached; they just never detected it. So,
good to hear different views on this.
Yeah.
And now turning on more current, like how is AI changing cyber risk in real world today, not just in theory?
Well, from my perspective, it's just increasing the pace, really on both sides. And as a non-technologist, would defer to Ben on how it's actually changing the nuts and bolts of how we're doing security. But my sense is it's just speeding us up, right? Absolutely helping us to assess anomalies better, to come to do analytics better, right? I think it's helping defense, but I think it's also helping speed up attacks, right? It's helping improve the quality of attacks. We saw from the beginning of generative AI, right? The ability to to do social engineering at scale, right? Because and to do it much better, right? To eliminate the grammatical errors and other dead giveaways of social engineering of 3.5, 4 years ago. But overall, what I see it aiding both sides in a way that's just ramping everything up more than anything. But I'm sure there are some details, in ways that it's helping and hurting.
Yeah, I think a lot of technologies are evolutionary. In security, they're constantly new technologies. The industry is evolving. AI is a revolution. And as Robert was saying, do things on scale, and it gives. There was things called script kiddies. People who would have security tools, they really wouldn't understand what they're doing, and they could launch attacks. AI just really increases this an order of magnitude. And as they said, those early phishing emails, with the blatant mistakes, they could make those mistakes because it was easy to send out 100 million emails, and even if your success rate was 0.00001%, in a third world country, that's still a lot of money. But AI is changing that in a big way. The emails, all of these things are they're customized, they're perfect. If I'm sending it to someone in the UK, I'll spell the word center, CENTRE. If I'm sending it to someone in Toronto, they'll use the term pop, not soda. All those things. So they're just upping it. As said, the deep fakes are significant. There was a deep fake of Marco Rubio like 6 months or so ago. I think it worried some people, but it's gotten to the point, if someone really did a deep fake of, you could, of Marco Rubio or someone in that senior government position, it could really create a international skirmish. But it really ups the ante with voice videos. I think McAfee said all you need about 30 seconds of audio to be able to create a deep fake. So for Robert and I, we've spoken more than 30 seconds so far on this. So we're at risk. But I said is AI makes everything really faster. Attackers always have the advantages of being there first, and an organization has to respond to that. That's one issue with AI. The good news is there's a lot of tools out there. The recent RSA conference, AI was all the buzz. There's a lot of vendors out there. That's one aspect of AI. Another is just that the data leakage. Companies don't realize when everything that goes. AI is a massive, massive sponge. It's a magnet. It's a black hole. It's just absorbing. And if that's done out of a corporate environment, they're taking that confidential, that proprietary information. Robert's a lawyer. I'm sure at his organization, they may use AI tools that are using in a controlled enterprise setting. But imagine a securities lawyer, a divorce lawyer, uploads the legal papers to ChatGPT. Now it's in the the public domain. And finally, organizations need to create AI usage policies. AI is a tool that is the genie's out. There's a lot of benefits. The question is, how do we use it? How do we use it safely? How do you use it to meet corporate policies? But those policies need to be in place. Those guardrails need to be put up. So it's forcing risk groups to really ramp up, very quickly. But for every defensive aspect of every offensive aspect of AI, which adversaries could use, there are defensive tools out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly SME layer here. Yeah. I'd like to shift slightly. What do you wish students understood earlier about this field?
So I see this mostly from the perspective of bringing new lawyers onto my team. And what I'm looking for is a perception of this field as inherently risk-based, right? That someone who has an appreciation. I want people to have an appreciation for the fact that you're wading into waters where the risks are everywhere, as we've covered a number of times, and we have to prioritize, right? We have to find the biggest risk and we have to solve for that. And then we'll move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. Sometimes maybe we're doing a couple at a time, but we have to organize ourselves in that way because the risks are too numerous to solve them all, right? And so I think coming into this profession with an appreciation for that, and the limits of what we can accomplish with the people we have and the time we have and the resources we have, I think would serve a person well as they come into what otherwise I think might look insurmountable, right? Building something from the ground up and thinking how am I ever going to protect against all of these risks? I think it's really having that mindset of what's the biggest risk and how can we start burning it down and move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think one mistake made is that they often think risk is about the the software tools, the firewalls, the hacking tools. It is that, and it's a lot more. It's not about finding vulnerabilities in 0 days. It's really understanding what is that level of risk that I could deal with. It's as I said, probably the biggest. You got to think about the economics of it, and risk is an inherent trade-off. I'm going to go outside without a jacket on. What's the risk there? If it's 50 degrees and it's a 5-minute walk, minimal risk. If it's negative 20 and you're walking a mile, that's a matter of life and death. I think there is an important point also. There's this misnomer about eliminating risk. You can never eliminate risk. You can only manage it. Meaning, if you could eliminate risk, there wouldn't be much to do. And every book, everything about risk is finding the ways to deal with them. There's the classic criteria is the 4 ways: are avoidance, reduction, transfer, and acceptance. I said, there's there's no problem accepting risk. Many times people think risk is a bad thing. Risk is it's risk and reward. They go together. So on a hourly basis, there's risks we all accept. You walk up the stairs, there's a risk a person could slip. You eat dinner, there's a risk. But we accept these things. Someone maybe has a sensitive stomach. They're going to think differently about buying food from a street vendor. And with that, the nature of risk is very different. The circumstances, to every organization, different, every entity. And when companies build out their risk management strategy, they say, here's our risk tolerance. Here's what we can accept. Here's what we can't accept. Just one nuance point. In some ways, it's a semantical issue, but a lot of companies, you see the term often use zero tolerance. If someone says, we have a zero tolerance policy for risk, they really should go out of business, because having systems in place implies you have to accept some, level of risk. If you have, a zero risk tolerance for inappropriate use of data, you can't do it. I said in fact, it's logically flawed, because it could never be achieved. So I think, as I said, it's students, may not understand these things, but once again, they're at the beginning of their journey into risk. But there's a lot of things out there, and it's a fascinating fascinating area to be in.
So that is such a great point. The way we think about this is we can build an experience where there's virtually no risk of fraud, but it will be so onerous for a legitimate user to access their information that no one will use our service, right? And so there is that trade-off that is inherent in providing these services to consumers. To the usability trade-off is significant, right? And I think coming into this business with a view that we have to do absolutely everything that's possible to secure the systems, will miss important business considerations to how we get things out to our customers for their betterment.
Useful points. Yeah.
I had a question on AI governance, actually. It's interesting the conversation kind of shifted a little bit there. But, where kind of, I like to think, again, I could be wrong here, but it's been, from all the reading that I've done, it's quite clear to me that we're still in the middle of it in terms of how we're addressing a lot of the new and emerging AI risks. I mean, just this week, we saw Claude with Mythos, and we had a lot of talk around that. If let's say we have students or fresh graduates going through an AI governance program where they're really looking to understand and address AI risks at large organizations or companies, or hope to work with clients where they solve these kinds of issues for them. What is something that they should be leaving these programs with? Like, should they really be focusing more on a specific standard? So maybe focusing on the EU AI Act or the NIST AI framework and applying that, or the ISO 42001, and training to be an auditor in that space. Is there something that you both kind of think of first and foremost when it comes to AI risk that students should be looking at before they even look at all of these standards and their application and implementation?
You think like what you're asking about, like technical skills or
Well, it's
or am I-
technical skills as well as addressing that business problem, right? Is a proficiency at the application and implementation of these standards, of being an auditor, either, an internal auditor or something else. Is that what is going to make them a desirable candidate, or is it something else when it comes to AI-based risk governance?
uh, I mean, just one thing I was here's a it might be there's this maybe you could see this, doesn't always come clear over Zoom. It's Charles Crescent Wood, Internal Policies for Artificial Intelligence Risk Management. Here he's got, hundreds of pages of policies and massive references. I know you might be able to Charles Crescent
Yep.
Wood, but the point being is, it's a very broad AI is, just this broad set of technologies and applications, and um, um, just understanding, how it works, the infrastructure it runs on, what are the risks, what are the guardrails. I think that's a start. As you mentioned, the EU has a directive. The good news is that it's a free document. It's fascinating. It's quite readable. If someone's dealing with just U.S. companies, they're not really going to have to be, on top of that. If you're, based in the EU and have a massive amount of EU data, that's a document that's going to be by your side, during the entire business week.
Yeah, we've also seen EU declarations influence US policy, right? So there's a possibility that makes its way over. There are a couple of states that have developed AI laws that are, I think, moving in the same direction as the EU AI Act. You've named the right standards, right? The NIST standard, I think, is important. It's emerging. I don't think there are a lot of institutions out there who are certified to that yet, but I do think it's coming. I do think it's probably similar principles though to any other technology at some level, right? There are obviously unique risks associated with AI, and you'd need to be grounded in those sort of core risks and keeping up to date, right? There are new papers published every day on new risks that are found in these LLMs, but helpfully also a lot of those papers contain some advice on how you might think about combating those risks, mitigating those risks. So I think in this space, it pays to keep your ear to the ground, right? Things change every 20 minutes, sometimes faster. And so this is a space where it's really beneficial to be have your sources, right? Places you trust to gather information on a daily basis about what's happening, and just make your own catalog of what should I be thinking about, what should I be looking for, and how does this affect us, and ask questions and find people you trust that are technical in this area, and really build that network of support, because I don't think any of us can really process any of this alone. And I think it changes so fast that you just got to be hyper aware of what's new and what's next. Does that
Sure.
help,
Thank you.
Saj?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
One more perspective to explore. What part of cyber risk work is less technical and more business focused than students usually expect?
I think probably the communication and writing skills are incredibly important. We said a few times, the ability to explain technical issues in plain business language, the ability to write good, clear, concise reports. As Robert said, dealing with people, no one, 25 years ago, you could have a person who was a Cisco expert and they knew everything about every product at Cisco because it wasn't that big. I mean, now Cisco has hundreds of products. So it's just the ability to, work in teams, and work on diverse teams with different people from legal, HR, engineering, and everyone in between. Those and the interesting thing, intellectual humility. No one could be a no. It's very complex now. The ability to say, I don't know, but I will get back to you with an answer. People would prefer that being put on hold for a bit than given the wrong answer that could really mess up their day. At the end of the day, people want someone who's reliable and responsible, and if a person can do that, then they're be invaluable to an organization.
I like all that. The one skill I'll add to it is leading with inquiry, right? Asking great questions and continuing to ask questions until you understand it. Because if you don't understand it, then chances are your stakeholders aren't going to understand it. And I think one of the things I push my team on is like, I don't expect you to be the technologist in the room, right? I expect you to be the person who's got their ears open and is listening to everything and is asking good questions to make sure the team understands what they're telling us and that they can explain it in a way, to Ben's point, that it'll be understood by critical stakeholders, right? Our customers, our partners, regulators, the media, right? If you can't explain it, then do you really know it? If you can't evidence it, did it really happen? I think, having the sort of professional skill of leading with inquiry can really set you apart as a member of one of these teams that's working on these issues.
And I'll close this section with one final question. What is one early career mistake you often see in people who want to grow in this field?
Yeah, I think one of the mistake is, sometimes people in IT focus on the technical aspect without, understanding, how the business, works. It's incredibly important, to understand the business, the risks. If you're working at Boeing, it's very different if you're working at PR Newswire, and if you're working at a pharma, it's different if you're working at a legal firm. So each organization has different risk drivers, and you need to know that intimately, well. And those who really have that sort of an MBA hat and a engineering hat, that's a good 1-2 punch, because the business and technology do work together. So I think just really getting a deep understanding of the business, the risk drivers, and all of that is quite important. And one thing also is, when it comes to risk, often people somewhat new to the area think risk is black and white. The reality is, most of the time it's gray, because if things were black and white, it would be easy decision, and you wouldn't need a large staff of often highly paid people to do that. It's mostly gray, and that's where the challenge is, and that's where the opportunity is also.
Yeah, I would suggest that I think you can go wrong falling in love with the solution and not the problem, right? Falling in love with a an approach, a technology, a way of resolving a mitigation rather than like trying to deeply understand the problem you're trying to solve. That's a business, that comes directly from our business, right? What is the customer problem we're trying to solve? And I think that a healthy appreciation for the problem will get you further down the road than sort of zealous advocacy for one solution over another, right? And it's tough because I think we're often rewarded for the solutions we bring to the table. But really, I think you can bring better solutions and you can justify your recommendations much better if you have a nuanced understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. So that would be, I think you'd do well to make that your first priority.
It's like a math problem, is you just want to see the logical flow, the steps, and you can you get the answer wrong and still get 90% credit because you show that its details, etc., as opposed to just having the correct answer and nothing to show for it.
Valuable insights. Thank you for all. We'll now take some questions. Please feel free to share your questions to our panelists. Yes, we have one question. Leanne, do you want me to ask, or should we allow him to ask?
Yes, so I know there's one question in the Q&A box. Samuel, let us know I'm going to give you the permission to talk if you'd like to read your question. Otherwise, Begum, you can go ahead and read it too.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hello. I'm a cybersecurity student doing a master's here at Toro. So basically, my question is this, that with the current AI landscape and alliances like Project Glasswing working to protect systems, it seems that the spike in cybersecurity attacks will be temporary until, networks are fully patched and secure. My question is the following. How do humans need to be trained from a psychological and social engineering standpoint? I've been testing AI from this perspective, and it's scary as hell how well it analyzes human nature. It worries me because it's a known fact that it's much easier to fool the human operating a system rather than to hack the system itself.
Yeah. So I'll start. Glasswing is super interesting. It is, I would say, hopeful at this moment. I'm not ready to grant the premise that Glasswing solves all vulnerabilities, or that even the resolution of all sort of embedded vulnerabilities, 0 days, in the parlance, is the end of sort of technical cybersecurity as we know it. There are lots of other vectors that we need to worry about that go beyond the sort of inherent vulnerabilities in the software that we're using. But I do grant your premise that improvement in that area will put more pressure on humans, right? Whatever happens, I think you are correct that probably our most vulnerable point in all of these systems is the people who operate them. And I think that is where we need to lean into training. We need to lean into a culture of awareness and a culture of vigilance, because they really are coming for us. I have to say it is. I haven't done this all my entire career, but one of the things that struck me as soon as I got into cybersecurity for the company is how much they really are coming for us all day, every day. And they're going to go to the path of least resistance, and I believe that you're correct that at present, in many cases, that's the people who operate the systems. So I worry about it, but I do think that there's more that most every organization can do to create that culture of vigilance. and defense, and that's where we need to spend at least some of our points going forward as the stakes rise on the technical side.
Yeah, I mean, it's attackers do have the first mover advantage, but defenders are catching up. People are the initial deep fake videos fooled a lot of people. There's was a number of high profile cases, so they'll always be quite successful, but they're losing their effectiveness because when you get this video from the CEO saying everyone now gets a 25% raise and take next month off, it's absurd. So it is it's a scary time, but with that, there's countermeasures that can be done to not only be able to sort of survive the AI apocalypse, but thrive also. Yeah,
Thank you so
great
much.
question.
We have another questions.
Open a question. Okay.
Any other questions, guys? Begum, Sach, anything else come to mind while we kind of wait for a couple more questions in the chat?
Well, not really. I think both Robert and Ben kind of covered everything that we could think of. There are a few GRC engineering podcasts that I've been catching up on. So maybe when we do this the second time around, it might be a good kind of anchor for that conversation. But this has been great. I've really enjoyed listening into both of you, and also to Begum's questions. They've been fairly pointed, and also got an inkling of basically the outlook on AI-based risk and governance. So thank you both for that, and thank you, Begum and Leanne, for arranging this.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Robert. I actually have one more question just from the career services side, is if you could share, what drew you to the organizations that you work at now, what's on the horizon for your teams, and maybe some actionable tips for what students could do if they're interested in applying and working at Intuit or Experian in the future. If there's anything you could share or add.
I mean, just there's the corporate websites have a careers section, and every company details their environment, their approach, what how people thrive at those companies. So really, as I said earlier, for the risk professional, understand the nature of the company, what you're trying to secure. For those trying to come in through the employment route, really understand the company, the culture, what's important to them, and then you can see if it's the type of company that you'd want to work at, and that is the best place they could settle and grow themselves.
Yeah, completely agree with that. I think we make a lot of information about the company and our values available to externally, and I think it really pays to spend some time with that when you're thinking about where you might cast your applications. What does the company say about its values? What does the company say about its customers? What's important to the company, and how does it organize itself around those priorities? I think those are really good questions to be asking, as a person in this field. I think this is a field that's in demand. I know we are constantly working on getting new diverse talent into our pipeline. And through internship programs and direct hiring, I think we're definitely trying to build our team and make sure we are constantly stacked against the threats that are out there. So I think reaching out to people who work at these companies can be a good idea, right? Not everybody's going to respond, but I think once in a while you'll find somebody who's really willing to talk to you about the way the company operates and what it means to work there. And be picky. Be picky. If you start at the start of your career, don't just take any job if you can avoid it, right? I mean, obviously sometimes needs must, but be selective. Try to find things that match your interests and your goals and your strengths, and places that'll have the potential to help you develop in areas where you're not quite as strong.
Well, thank you both for those tips. I took the liberty just to find and see if there was, any internship or early career information. So I'm going to put the links to those in the chat. But thank you again. Our Office of Career Services is so glad that we had the chance to partner with our cybersecurity department and give the floor to one of our rising graduates. So Begum, well done. Ben, Robert, really appreciate your time. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Begum, Satch, anything else as we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you again to our old panelists for sharing your time and insights with us today. And also a special thank you to the university as well, to Leanne, Saj for their support throughout all this process. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. We hope this session has helped make cyber risk more practical and easier to understand.
Thank you, Begum, for the great questions. It was a really good set of topics to discuss.
It was a pleasure for me.
All right, you guys got 13 minutes back in your day, so go spend it wisely. Thank you all.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.